on average, just in the United States, about 220 people die every single day from an opiate overdose. By the time we finish this show, 8 to 10 people are going to die from an opiate overdose. If we get even one person, one viewer with this program that we might be able to help with some of the information that's shared on here, then it's all worth it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dare Me podcast. It's your old pal Glenn Victor Peace coming to you live from Sacramento, California. And this is episode 43 of the Dare Me podcast and our very first full episode for the year 2024. And I say our very first full episode because we also went live on New Year's Eve 1 week ago tonight and rang in the new year live right here on the Dare Me podcast on both the East Coast and the West Coast. And speaking of the East Coast, that's where our co-host and producer Dean Baker is standing by live at the PFX Media Digital Studios in Orlando, Florida. So we're going to bring him aboard with us live right now and say hello to Dean Baker. Happy New Year once again, Dean.
Happy 2024.
Yeah,
how's your year? So one week in.
Yeah,
51 more to go.
Yeah. How's it going for you so far in the new year? Everything off to a good start?
I am yeah. It's actually pretty good. So
yeah,
well,
got
another week of hopefully just another week and I'll be walking.
Yeah, well, since you mentioned it, for anybody who didn't know that, and by the way, I see we already got several people watching and listening to the live show. Welcome aboard, y'all. Happy New Year. We're glad to have you here with us. Yeah, in case you didn't know, y'all, Dean broke his leg a few weeks back, and I would never share Dean's personal information without his approval, but we've talked about it in great detail on this show. Had a little motorcycle mishap and broke his leg. So you say the recuperation is coming along okay, Dean?
All right.
Oh, wow. Look at that. There's a picture of the pins they put in and the x-ray. Holy cow.
I got a titanium rod going all the way down the leg from the knee to my ankle.
Wow.
And I got a pin up top and a few, half a dozen pins on the bottom of that. Looks like they put a little crossbar in. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. But I am the Terminator now.
On the mend. Wow. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, looking at that picture, Dean, reminds me of my photos of when I broke my ankle, which started my whole addiction to the opioids. They prescribed that shit to me, and I started taking it. And as I've said many times on this program, I should have known better. Having a long history with addiction and recovery, by the way, started partying as a young kid, got hooked on that shit, stayed clean for years, and then had a relapse and stayed clean again for years, and then broke my ankle. And my x-rays, I still have them, Dean, look pretty similar to what you just showed, and then got hooked on that damn opioid pain medication. Now, as we were, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
Talking about just before the show, Dean, the good Lord willing, man, coming up on 3 years clean on March 11th, 100% drug-free. Yeah, thank you for that. But as we often say, man, I say it for the cause, not for the applause. Of course, I'm very grateful, very proud, very humble, too. And I'm also happy that, as you've shared openly on this show with us, Dean, based in part on some of the things you've learned on this show, that you chose not to take the opioid medication that they prescribed you and sent you home with when you went home after breaking your leg and got by on, what was it, ibuprofen? Is that what you were taking?
I was taking Advil, but
Or
they
yeah.
I did get a script. I got a script for Oxy.
Yep. Yep.
I just chose not to use it. The
Good for
last
you,
the
man.
last one I took was just before they whatever they call it, checked me out of the hospital.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really acting up. And go, I have no idea what I'm going to be hitting, but why don't you give me? So I did have a Percocet, I think, in the hospital, like just before my exit there. I had
Yep.
no idea. I had no idea. So I took the script, filled the script, just never touched the stuff.
Well, yeah, and that's great, man. I appreciate you being so open and honest with us for all our viewers and listeners. That just because you're prescribed that shit, even when you break your freaking leg, you don't
Yeah.
have to take it. It's
No,
like
no.
I get it that you filled it and wanted
Yeah.
to have it kind of on standby just in case you got into that much pain, man. But you know, we're capable of handling a lot more pain than sometimes I think the healthcare providers, if you will, might like to think. And we can
Every
definitely
injury is different. Every injury is different. Every wound is different, and every person's
yeah.
pain
And
tolerance
every
is different.
person is
Yep.
different. You're
Yep.
exactly right. But it's a risk when you're taking that shit.
Yeah.
That's for sure, as we know from the whole opioid crisis, which we're going to be talking a little bit about later in the show. We have a couple of stories in the opioid crisis news, which, has become a regular part of this show as we're into episode 43 now, that we always talk a little bit about the opioid crisis in the news. Now, I do want to say, for our regular viewers and listeners, that tonight's show is going to be a little bit of a shorter version than what we usually do. We usually go 2.5 hours. We're really going to try to keep the show at maybe about an hour and 15 minutes for a very special reason tonight. But before we do that and talk about that, I'm going to show a little photo here because we want to start giving a little plug to our boy Dean. This is the PFX Media Studios in West Orange County in the greater metropolitan Orlando, Florida area. And for any of our viewers and listeners that may be in the Central Florida area, if you have any type of you know, video production needs, things along that line, live webcasting needs for a conference or whatever the case may be. PFX Media and Dean Baker, our co host, are your people that you want to work with. And maybe, just maybe, you've even thought about starting your own podcast. Dean's the guy to talk to. Him and some of his colleagues there at PFX Media have this podcast studio, and it's located, and I don't mean to be speaking for you, Dean,
No, go
but
ahead. Doing
located
great.
in a shopping mall, and actually a nice, what's called the West Oaks Mall in West Orlando. And they've got a really nice setup there. And so anyway, when I was visiting Orlando just several weeks back, went and paid a visit, and we got some photos, and there's me and Dean sitting in one of the studios here, because there's a couple of different ones. So
Yep.
yeah, Dean, just wanted to give you a little plug on the
Thank
front
you.
end of the show. But anyway, as I was saying, y'all, we're going to try to move this show along a little bit tonight for a very special reason. And I'm going to explain that reason right now. We're going to do some shout outs on the front end right out of the gate. And one of them is to this boy right here, my best friend from the FLA, Mark. And for those of y'all, I know we have a lot of regular viewers and listeners from the Central Florida area, because I lived there for 30 years. Coming to you live right now from Sacramento, California, where I've lived for about a year and a half now. Moved out here to be near my beautiful daughter, Alyssa. But I lived in Orlando, in the greater Orlando area, for 30 years. So I have lots of friends, family, colleagues in that area that tune into the podcast regularly. And we appreciate it. Love y'all for that. Anyway, Mark, one of my longest and longtime friends in recovery, by the way, in the program, and he's here visiting right now. He's literally in the other room as we speak. He's getting ready to go to a meeting with me when we get the podcast finished up tonight. This meeting starts at 7:30, and we really want to be there because Mark is celebrating not one, not two, but 3 years clean tonight. So we want to send a big shout out and congratulations to Mark. Man, we really do have a unique and a special bond and friendship. And man, I'm trying not to get emotional thinking about it. Mark flew all the way here to Sacramento in California from Orlando, Florida, just so he could ask me to present him with his 3 year medallion signifying his 3 years of clean time. And we had some time. He's been here for a couple of days. He wanted to take a ride up to Lake Tahoe to see snow. And so we went up, and you can see in the background there's some snow there. Got my little dog Jazzy. And this is at a place called Emerald Bay, and you can see the water in the background. And it was really kind of cool that we got to go because once again, and oh, by the way, we want to send a shout out to that girl, Carol and John in the chat room. They are joining us live and say, congratulations, Mark. Love you. And hey, thanks for tuning in, John and Carol there. And yeah, big shout out to that boy, Mark. And it was so cool that him and I got to go to Tahoe couple of days ago because again, if you're a regular viewer listener to the show, you may recall Mark was here to visit last summer, and we took a trip up there, and we had an episode of the show called Live from Lake Tahoe, and we took a lot of video up there, and Dean got real busy on some of that video and put some promo reels together. And we're going to show one right now. It was one of our most viewed reels on the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel. So if Mark looks familiar in the picture there, it may be because we had him included in some video we shot up there last summer. And here's that reel I was talking about. Dean, if you want to go ahead and play that, let's do it right now. From 6,000 feet above sea level here on top of Eagle Rock in Lake Tahoe. And I'm going to try not to get emotional, y'all, but I was just thinking to myself, just a little over 2 years ago, I was isolating in that bedroom back in Orlando, strung out on the dope, If y'all follow my podcast and my story, you know that, I got hooked on opiates, man, for a 9-year run, and man, picked up the bottle again while I was trying to kick, and man, my boy Mark, he saw that shit firsthand, man. We were pretty. Man, that dope had my mind so fucked up I was ready to check out. And so I'm just saying, man, if you come across this shit, don't give up, man. Just keep fighting, keep fucking fighting, don't give up, because look where I am today, man. Wow. Yeah, Dean, thanks for putting that reel together, man. That one's emotional. It gets me filled up watching that one, man. And so, yeah, anyway, y'all, congratulations to Mark on 3 years clean. I'm so happy we got to take a ride up to Tahoe. Again, this was day before yesterday because they just got blasted with a big storm up there yesterday. It was supposed to get up to 20 inches up in like the Truckee area, which is kind of north of where we're at right here. But we took a ride up. It's only about an hour and 45-ish minutes from where I live here. And we had a great time, man. Of course, gave us lots of time to catch up in the car, what we call windshield time. And so anyway, he's getting ready as we speak to go hit that meeting tonight, and we're going to celebrate Mark's 3 years clean. So big shout out to Mark. We got another one we're going to do now. If you're a regular viewer and listener to the podcast, you may remember that boy Steve Lawrence. He just celebrated 10 years clean this past week. And yeah, Steve was on an episode of the show a while back. We called it the God Thing, and we had 3 guests on that night. We had him, we had our friend Shebang, we had that girl Melissa Dawn, who's been on the podcast a couple times. And so, man, I'm so proud to call Steve my friend. Let's read what he wrote just real quick here, y'all. He says, Addict Steve, good morning, family. As I sit here overcome with emotion, see, I ain't the only one, y'all. And those emotions being gratitude, joy, peace, and love, I can't help but to be so thankful for everybody that's been a part of this with me, whether it's been one day or it's been the whole time. The people that are still here from the beginning and the people that I had to part ways with, I'm truly grateful for them all. And I get it, Steve. I totally get it, man. Some people are in our life for a season, but definitely help us along the way. And we're grateful for them too. As I sit in my own home with my children and I think about the gifts recovery has given me, I am brought to tears. Today I celebrate 10 years clean and in recovery. And today I feel most fortunate that I get to be one of the people who stayed and I get to help others. We, as he wrote, did this. Big love. What a great picture of Steve, man. I love that picture of Steve. Big smile. And here's one of him on the podcast. I know this is a different picture. Dean and I were kind of joking about it
No,
before the show. This is it was just a screenshot I took,
you
y'all.
frame grabbed the wrong frame.
You
Yeah.
don't look so happy there. It was just the way I got the screenshot. And of course, you see Melissa and Shebang off there on the right. That was back on episode 13. So that was
Oh,
30 episodes ago. But look at that big smile right there. And we got to get Steve back on the podcast, man. And by the way, he, in addition to being recovery advocate, he has recovery houses that he allows people to live in, just like that boy Marvin, who we're going to talk about in a minute. Steve is also very active on social media. He posts daily inspirational recovery messages. Go look him up, man. Definitely go follow Steve. This is from his Facebook page, Steve Lawrence. He's on Insta, he's on TikTok. What a great guy. And man, we're so proud to call him friend and have had him on the podcast. So shout out Steve on 10 years. So I mentioned Marvin, and there he is, Marvin Lilly, who we had live in the studio there at your location, Dean, that we were just talking about there in the West Oaks Mall in West Orlando. Marvin came in and we got to interview him live in the PFX Media Dare Me podcast studio there. And Marvin just celebrated, y'all. Oh my gosh, so hard not to get emotional. 36 years clean. And you can see he posted this card that some of the ladies in the Orlando area there made for him. And he wrote, the messages inside are priceless. And that picture of Marvin there is him actually speaking at the Orlando NA convention that they just did late last year called Gifts of Gratitude. Marvin is an outstanding recovery speaker. And we also have this picture from when he was in the studio there at Dean's studio. And just like Steve, Marvin also provides recovery housing for those in, recovery and looking to get and stay clean. And there is the telephone number if somebody who may come across this podcast and is interested in finding out more information, has both male and female recovery housing. And there's the telephone number right there. And we are so proud to call Marvin our friend as well. So congratulations to that boy, Mark, on 3 years clean tonight. Congratulations to Steve Lawrence from Detroit City, who is celebrating 10 years this just a couple days ago, and Marvin celebrating 36 years. And he's actually, I think, being presented with his medallion tonight at my home group from Central Florida, still working on it. What are we looking at here, Dean? What do we got?
okay. When you said Marvin's involved with, in fact, the other gentleman was involved in recovery houses, and of
Yes.
course I just searched it. Oops, hang on. I just searched it. Where is it? Mind, body, and soul. It jumped up here real fast. It's here now. It's like, but when I go in, oh, there it is, mind, body, and soul. Right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah.
one. So that's one. But when I did search recovery houses on Google near me, look at what opens up.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Look
Oh,
at
I
what opens up. Look at what
yeah.
opens
Well,
up.
it's like we discussed on this show, Dean. You got to be real careful about
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
your research. Because there's some out there, and we talked about that in great detail. In fact, on the podcast that we had Marvin as a guest on, not all of them are necessarily legit. So do
right.
your research, make sure you're getting into one with a good reputation. But oh, yeah, they're out there. They are all around. That is for sure. It's big business, in some areas. But again, the ones that Marvin and Steve are running in both the metro Detroit area and the greater Orlando area, those are great ones, y'all, and they
Yeah,
are legit. So we want to send shout outs again to Mark, Steve, and Marvin. Thank you guys for being such an inspiration to all the rest of us. So, moving on, y'all, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of recovery events. And this one is coming up real soon, right here near where I live in the Sacramento area. And this is called the Tri Area Convention of NA, Narcotics Anonymous. And you can see in the logo underneath it, it's a combination of all these different areas in Northern California that come together to put this convention on. And this is the 24th annual one. It's going to be held January 19th through the 21st. And yours truly, you'll be out there. So, hey, if any of the rest of y'all from around the country or other parts of the world might like to come to attend, we'd love to have you. Uh, this one's going to be again held at the Gold Country Fairgrounds in Auburn, which is not too far from where I live. And you can see it's a combination of the Sierra Foothills area. And, I won't read them all to you, but you see in the logo there, they all are. And that one is going to be a ball. Now, moving on to another convention that's coming up. I've talked about this one many times on the podcast. This is the World Convention of Narcotics Anonymous, the 38th one. They didn't start off doing, and NA has been around, if you will, since 1953. So, it's a lot longer than 38 years that it's been around. It's just that, they didn't have a world convention right out of the gate when NA was formed and started, and they don't do them every single year anymore. They used to, but it's just gotten so big and become such a huge event. In fact, in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, they only do their conference every 5 years. It's a whole big deal, y'all. They fill up a freaking football stadium. Thousands and thousands of people come from around the world to attend these events. And so this is going to be the first one in since before the COVID pandemic, because that thing really put a damper on a lot of conferences. But anyhow, here's a flyer that was released that provides a lot of information. It's going to be in Washington, D.C. The hotel information is supposed to be released in just a couple days on the 10th. But they did include information on the flyer here and all that they've negotiated discounted rates with, I think, like 20 different hotels in the DC area. And all the main events will be going on at the convention center and all that sort of thing. So yeah, yours truly will be there, and we'll do a little something for the podcast about the convention. When this thing happens, they are always a lot of fun. So anybody who may be new to recovery or just coming across our podcast, maybe looking for information about how to get clean and what life might be like if you're able to and all that other stuff, man, we have all kinds of fun stuff, cool stuff going on all the time And one of my favorite things to do, because I've been around, the block in the 12-step programs for a long time. Didn't really go into my long story tonight on the podcast because we are trying to, do this particular edition of the show in an hour or so because we want to go celebrate that boy Mark's 3 years clean tonight. But yeah, I've been around the program in the 12-step rooms of AA, NA, fucking A, as we jokingly say, since I was a kid, and I'm going to be 62 years old in a month. I've been doing this thing for a long time, y'all. I got clean for the first time at 24 years old. So, where I'm going with that is I have been to a lot of NA and AA conventions, conferences, events, and they are a blast, man. They have so much cool stuff going on. There's all kinds of workshops and breakout meetings and speakers, seminars, just entertainment. They have comedians and dances and concerts and just fellowship and banquets and clean time countdowns and roll calls from people all around the country and the world. You get the idea. And they're ordinarily a few day event. And man, I'm getting excited talking about it. This is gonna be a ball, man. It really is. So anyway, we'll be talking about this event a lot more as it approaches because it's not until Labor Day weekend, but we are now into the year of 2024. And I know a lot of people in and around NA have been looking forward to this one. And it's finally coming up, this year, Labor Day weekend. So we'll talk a lot more about that as it approaches, y'all. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and transition right into the opioid crisis news tonight. We got not one, but two stories we're going to talk about. One of them includes a video, and I think you're going to dig it. It's a ride along that a reporter from the Bay Area WXYZ TV station went on with local authorities in San Francisco, like a drug bust ride along. And there's some footage in here from the Tenderloin District, which we talked about many times on this show. There's an episode of this podcast. If you go to the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel, at Dare Me Podcast on YouTube, and you click on the videos tab, you will see every single episode of this show we've ever done. And this is episode 43. So you just scroll down and look for one called Back from the Dead. And you will see some video footage of yours truly doing a ride through in the Tenderloin District, a drive through, I should say. And man, it ain't pretty. Had some things happen that I won't go into great detail about right now. If that aroused your curiosity, go find that episode on the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel and watch it. It'll freak you the hell out. And so, in any case, what had happened was I came across this story where a reporter from this TV station did a ride along with the cops going on drug busts in the San Francisco area. And they did happen to go through the Tenderloin, too. It's about a 5-minute video. Here's a headline for the story that caught my attention. Building a better Bay Area. ABC News rides along as plainclothes San Francisco Police Department officers make drug arrests. And it references this in the story, and we may spend a little time talking about it afterwards, that despite more arrests, San Francisco will have the highest number of accidental overdoses on record. You can see this story came out January 3rd. So, they're referencing, the previous year of 2023. But yeah, man, we've talked a lot about the crackdown going on in that area. And I just want to put this little disclaimer out there before we show the story. We talk a lot about San Francisco and the Tenderloin and everything going on over there because it's bad over there, y'all. It is. I'll also say we're not picking on San Francisco. I love San Francisco. Oh my God, what a beautiful city with such a rich history. I'll also say I live pretty close to there. You know, it's less than a couple hours away from me. And this Tenderloin district has gotten a lot of attention in the news, not to mention just the whole city of San Francisco in general. You know, they had that big conference with the president of China coming to town and all these other dignitaries. And, you know, the city took some shit for cleaning up the city because all the dignitaries were coming, but didn't worry too much about it before that, you know, and a lot of people, you know, kind of criticized them for that and everything going on. So, you know, but I guess the point I'm making is, you know, I've been over there several times in the last year myself, and yeah, it can, you know, definitely be a little frightening in certain areas, and it's bad in certain areas, but it ain't no damn different than what's going on in any other major city around the country right now with this whole fentanyl thing going on and the whole opioid crisis. You know, we've talked about that bad area in Philadelphia. We've talked about Miami. We've talked about Orlando. Yeah, Mickey Mouse, man, has got its bad areas too. Detroit City, you name it, and everywhere in between. We're going to be talking about Idaho in a minute after this story. So the point I'm making again, y'all, is we're not picking on San Francisco. I love that city. They are making an effort to, you know, clean it up a little bit over there. But even despite all their efforts with the crackdown and everything, they're about to reach, you know, the highest number of accidental ODs on record when they release the actual numbers for 2023 here very soon. So with all that said, Dean, do you have that video on standby? Can we go ahead and give that one a look and a listen now?
Yes, here we go.
Talk about it when we're done. Thanks.
Rampant drug dealing and drug use in San Francisco's
You got no sound?
No sound. Yeah. We can start it over if we need to. Yeah, we'll start it over.
All right.
Anything can happen live, y'all, as we often say. Some kind of demon in the system there. But
all right,
yeah.
let's try it again.
Let's try it again, y'all, because this is interesting.
We won't do, let's do this one. Yes. Okay, here we go. This should be fine.
Building a better Bay Area means ending rampant drug dealing and drug use in San Francisco's Tenderloin.
More than 6 months ago, San Francisco police received a directive from the mayor to start making more drug-related arrests, targeting both drug dealers and users.
That's right. ABC 7 News reporter Leanne Melendez is here with the latest numbers and the impact these arrests are having.
So this is, as they say, a bit of a conundrum.
Okay.
Because the number of arrests for both drug dealers and users doubled. Yet this year, San Francisco will have more accidental overdoses than any other year. So here's the explanation we received from both health officials and police.
ABC 7 News was invited to follow plainclothes officers during one of many drug surveillance operations in the two neighborhoods where drug dealing is rampant.
All right, not yet, but you guys just come eastbound Mission.
We have people who are observing the actions of this suspect. And we're going to try to move in and make an arrest at this time.
This last year, 2023, police arrested 960 suspected dealers in the Tenderloin neighborhood alone, compared to 566 the previous year, 2022. We were there for one of them.
Let me ask you what went down here.
So we're doing a narcotics surveillance operation where we set up one officer watching the area. They observe what they believe to be a suspected hand-to-hand narcotics transaction. Then they radio us in the arrest team. They give us a description, a detailed physical description of the person. They tell us where they're at. As the arrest team, we move in and we place the person under arrest. And then we wait for the officer that saw the observation. We wait for them to come over here, and then they conduct a search.
Because he has not been convicted, we are not showing his face. Police find several stashes in his backpack of what they believe is crack cocaine. Most officers here are certified Spanish speakers.
Where is he from?
Jared, let me see. So he has a Honduran passport.
So he's from Honduras. A lot of people from dealing drugs from Honduras?
Very, very many, yeah.
drug sales, property crime.
One of the arguments made by the former district attorney was that many dealers were immigrants from Honduras who had been illegally trafficked to the United States. In court, many still use that as part of their defense, but that's not what officers say they hear on the streets.
Do many people say that they're here because they fear for the lives of their families in Honduras? They've been threatened.
From my experience, we're not really ever really told that. They're here to send money back home, not because they're victims of human trafficking or anything like that.
The suspected dealer gave police a different name from that on his passport, which he happens to have with him. He had been arrested before using a false name. Police told us half of the suspects arrested for the sale of drugs were either on probation, pre-trial release, or had active stay-away orders. This despite requests made in court by the current DA to keep them in custody.
We're explaining that many of them have been arrested not once, not twice, even 3 times for dealing fentanyl in our city, and these judges are not taking it seriously. They're allowing the courthouse to be a revolving door.
The number of drug users in the Tenderloin arrested in 2023 nearly doubled from the previous year. So how is it that the city will have the deadliest year on record for accidental drug overdoses, with 752 through November 2023? Health department officials have tried to make sense of this disparity by explaining that arresting someone and forcing them into treatment often backfires.
In fact, their risk of overdose sometimes sort of paradoxically goes up. We've said you can't use, you may not, and created a situation where they're not using opioids. Their tolerance goes down, and a relapse can be deadly.
It just shows how much of a battle this is with trying to keep people alive, and people are still going to continue to use.
So we have an update for you on the person arrested that you saw there on December 21st. He was charged with possession to sell drugs and released 5 days later while awaiting trial, even though he had been arrested before for selling drugs. And it's not uncommon for a county, a district attorney from a different city or what have you, to have somebody charge and release them.
Okay.
You know, the judges. Right. But here in San Francisco, 2 and 3 or 4 times. They're released, yes, and that is what the district attorney here in San Francisco argues constantly.
Okay. And that has to be frustrating for the people on the streets.
Yes,
right?
Sure.
Police, yeah.
Thank you, Leanne.
Sure.
Well, there you go. And hey, shout out to the ABC affiliate there, WXYZ in San Francisco, and the reporter. What an outstanding job, I thought, on that in-depth report that went close to 6 minutes long. You know, unfortunately, a lot of times with television news anymore, you're lucky if you get, you know, a minute and a half the news coverage of something where they can barely even, you know, talk about the thing. So they did some in-depth coverage on that. One thing that was, you know, very interesting for a person, especially like myself and others that are in recovery, that they talked about is the one person there that was, you know, speaking to the chamber is an interesting paradox is when they arrest people and, as she put it, force them into recovery, it can have this unwanted, you know, result of resulting in an overdose because their tolerance level goes down. But then when they're back on the streets, they go and start using the same amount they were using before they detoxed, and it kills them or they OD. And that is a real challenge right there because there is a whole tolerance thing with the opiates, and your tolerance definitely goes down, you know, the more you use, and it goes back up when you're, you know what I'm saying. The longer you're off of it, You don't have the same tolerance level as you do when you're using it on a regular basis. And that's what happens to a lot of people, especially for a lot of people who relapse, maybe been living clean for a long time, and then they start using again. And they think they can go back to using the same amount when they got clean. No, that ain't the case. So, anyway, once again, I thought we'd show that. Interesting story. Definitely gave us a unique perspective on what's going on there, man. And God, if you recall, Dean, we talked a little bit about it on that New Year's Eve edition, how they have done the crackdown there in that Tenderloin area. And those big crowds we saw in that story right there of people using in the open air, streets, so to speak, is not going on during the day there anymore. They've really done a crackdown during the day, but at night, it's still like that, man. That like freaked me out. All them people on the street just using, selling dope. It's exactly what I saw when I did my drive through over there. So, nonetheless, the unfortunate part is even despite the crackdown and everything, y'all, they're going to, release the final numbers for 2023 soon. And as we just heard in that report, it will reveal the highest number of accidental overdoses in the Bay Area there in San Francisco on record. So, with all that said, God bless all the folks working to get that under control over there. Let's transition to this next story, because as a result of all that mess that we just saw there, and like I said, what's going on around the rest of the country is all a result of this opioid crisis that started as a direct result of all these meds that were overprescribed by all the pharmacies, and what was approved for big pharma to manufacture and start rolling out there, the Oxycontin, and then all the rest, that the feds, I often say on here, stand by it, look the other way and let it happen. Sure makes you wonder, man, like with all these political action committees and people, walking the halls and lobbying the halls of Congress, who got, paid off what and what contribution was made to this candidate or that to, look the other way and allow this fucking shit to happen, man. That's killed so many people and is still killing people on a regular basis and almost killed yours truly, because I got caught up in that madness. I accept responsibility for my own choices, like I've shared on this podcast many a times. I should have fucking known better getting caught up in that shit, especially with my history of struggles with addiction. I'll also say, man, I was prescribed this shit by a doctor. I was in pain. I did break my fucking ankle, you know what I mean? And I got hooked, and they just kept writing it, man. And God, I went from, Vicodins, Norcos to, Perks to Oxys and Demerol. And at the end, they giving me Dilaudid and shit. And then I ended up fucking snorting heroin at the end because I couldn't get the pills anymore, but I'd get dope sick. And you're trading with other people, and then somebody getting it off the street, then you're getting it off the street. And never in a million years would I ever have thought something like that would happen to a guy like me. But it did. And I'm lucky to be alive. And, getting back to what I talk about often on this podcast, that's why I do this podcast, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But, our hope is that maybe, just maybe, something we talk about on here might help inspire someone who maybe went down that rabbit hole like I did to snap out of it and try to get clean, and not worry about this fucking stigma we talk about so much on this podcast, having to do with addiction and, oh God, I don't want nobody to know. Oh, what are they going to think of me? Oh, what about my job? What about my family? What about your life? Save your fucking life, man. Do what you got to do to get off of that shit. And there is help out there if you want it. And that's part of what this story is all about. This is going on all around the country, y'all. I just happened to come across this story that's very recent. And as you can see, it's dated January 5th. And this county here is about to begin distribution of the opioid settlement funds. Just over $100,000 has been received to date by Blaine County. And Dean is going to bring up this article, and we're going to scroll through it a little bit. It's in Idaho, and Blaine County in Idaho has been working on just exactly how they want to dice and slice. And is there any way you can hit that little X there, Dean, on that welcome? We hope you enjoy your free content. There's a little X in that box. See it? Where it says 4 remaining of 5. There's, yeah, right there. There we go. Now we can see a lot better. Thank you. So anyway, yeah, if you scroll down, I was going to do some screenshots of this article, y'all, but they did a fantastic job on this article. Just like the news story we just watched, they went very in depth. And so we've talked a lot on this podcast about trying to keep an eye on how all this money is diced and sliced and distributed and all. And as it says, state and local governments across the country, including Blaine County in Idaho, are expected to receive more than 50 billion, y'all, billion with a B, not million, $50 billion in legal settlement funds that are going to be spread out, supposedly, over the next 2 decades, 20 years, for more than a dozen of the companies, including the infamous Sackler family and Purdue Pharma, for their part in creating this fucking mess. And so, in any case, as it says, Blaine, if you want to scroll up a little bit, Dean, we'll get into a little bit more of how they've decided. No, the other way. I should have said down. Yeah. Are going to start using the money here. It says they received their first installment of funds in 2022. The amount varies because there's actual different settlement agreements for varying amounts from different parties. And yeah, go up a little bit more, Dean, because I kind of want to get to the part where they start talking about what they're going to use it for, because I think that's what's really important. Okay, I like this. On January 2nd, the commissioners approved a contract with what's called the Haley Nonprofit Men's Second Chance Living, awarding $15,000 for that organization to house up to 15 participants in its all-male sober living homes in Haley. Residents currently pay $420 a month to share a bedroom. And then the board also approved a $30,000 contract with this agency called KH Counseling and Health Center to operate certified drug and alcohol counseling. Now, those are the types of things that I personally believe the bulk of this funding should be going to. If you remember, Dean, we've talked about on this podcast, we had some law enforcement agencies wanting to get their hands into the pie a little bit to get, bulletproof vests and police scanners and new police cruisers. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute. What's that all about? And they're saying that they feel justified because they've had to devote more of their resources to enforcing things like what we just saw in that video news story. So, that's a tough one. We're pro law enforcement. We got nothing against law enforcement. It kind of had a weird, taste to it, if you will. That money wasn't going to things like counseling and rehab and stuff like that. I also like that talked a little bit about Narcan in this article. And if you go up just a little bit, Dean, you just kind of scrolled past it. No, the other way, while I was talking there, that they are planning to use some of this money right there in the middle. Davis said that other counties have used the funding to set up distribution centers for naloxone, which is Narcan, the medication that can reverse the opioid ODs. But it says, but first responders in Blaine County already have the medication available. Well, that's just first responders. What about everybody else? Well, they do sell this shit over the counter now at Walgreens and CVS and everything else, but it's $50, for a couple doses. So, as you've said, Dean, this shit should be free. to anybody that wants it. And I happen to agree with you, and hopefully, with any luck, maybe in Blaine County, some of that money there in Blaine County in Idaho could be used to provide free Narcan. So, anyhow, y'all, that's just one little story I thought we'd touch on having to do with this opioid lawsuit settlement fund money. Yeah. There's going to be a shit ton of other stories coming down the pike over the next however many months, and as it even referenced, years. And yeah, man, I just, God, when you're talking about $50 billion, we all know there's going to be some shit in the game. Some of that money is going to end up in pockets that it shouldn't. There's going to be some scandalous programs out there, some bullshit, stuff going on. And God, man, I just hope that there's good watchdog agencies out there making sure this money is used properly to help combat this opioid crisis, and also to help the victims of it, in whatever way that it may be able to help. So that's our two stories in the opioid crisis news tonight, y'all, kind of from one extreme to the other. We saw a reporter go on a ride along with the cops doing drug busts, and getting an up close and personal of the opioid crisis going on. And then on the other extreme, how are we trying to, resolve this crisis and do stuff about it with the opioid settlement fund? So yeah, man, it ain't going away, that's for sure. But efforts are being made to help reduce it. But unfortunately, like we just saw in San Francisco, 2023 will, when they release the final numbers, will have been the highest year on record for accidental overdose deaths in that area. So hopefully some of these opioid settlement funds can really be put to good use and work in that area, not to mention all the other areas around the country, to help to bring those numbers down and start saving lives, and also be put into prevention, not just treatment on the front end rather than just on the back end. So anyhow, with all that said, y'all, we're going to transition. And like I said, if you're just joining us, I see we got some new people in the viewing room. We're going to wrap the show up a little bit earlier than usual tonight, because our old friend Mark, who's visiting Sacramento right now from Orlando, Florida, is celebrating not one, not two, but 3 years clean tonight. And he's here visiting, and we're going to go catch an NA meeting tonight so he can be presented with his 3-year medallion, signifying his 3 years clean. But before we do that, we want to talk about this, which blows my mind, y'all. Man, I posted some stuff on social media about this, and I just thought we'd take a minute or two to talk about it on the show tonight before we wrap it up. After we concluded our marathon 5-hour session of the Dare Me podcast on New Year's Eve, which thank you again for doing that with me, Dean. Man, we went hard at it. We did. And you can watch that whole show, by the way, folks. If you go to the Dare Me podcast YouTube channel, don't click on the videos tab, click on the live tab, and you will see every edition of the show we've ever done live. Those are the live, raw, unedited versions of the show. If you click on the video tabs, you'll see the nice, cleaned up and edited, video, editions. But under the live tab, it's all raw. And I haven't done anything with that New Year's one yet, in terms of, we're going to pull some stuff out of it and post it. But if you go there, you'll see that whole show we did that night. After that show concluded, I got these results you're looking at right here from YouTube. And I was telling Dean before the show today, I knew the numbers were getting up there because I get the monthly recap. When we first started this podcast last March 12th. Was it March 12th? Yeah. No, was it March 11th? I can't remember. It was last March.
Close enough.
Yeah, right. we saw the numbers start going up, from we were getting, a few hundred to hundreds to over 1,000 to 2,000, 2.1, 2.7. Then we had over 7,000 people in November. So I knew the annual total was getting up there. I had no idea, y'all, that we had over 21,000 views on our Dare Me podcast YouTube channel in 2023. Blows my mind. I know I do that a lot, y'all, but it really did catch me by surprise. I had no idea. Keeping in mind that this is our YouTube channel. It doesn't include all the views we get on Facebook and on Threads and on LinkedIn, on X, and now we're on Twitch and all these other platforms. This is just the Dare Me Podcast YouTube channel. How the hell did that happen? It just blows my mind. Now, I will tell y'all, being transparent, the bulk of these views are on the shorter reels we do that are sound bites from the show that Dean's been working real hard on. I've done some. I do different promo reels. Of course, we've had shout outs from some high profile celebrities like Billy Bob Thornton, Lamar Odom, people like that. So a lot of them views have come from that kind of stuff. But 21,000, over 21,000 people have, viewed our YouTube channel, just freaking blows my mind. So it really got me thinking about, oh my God, what do we do with this? We've clearly built some kind of following and an asset in hopefully accomplishing what we set out to do, is even help even one person with what we talk about and do on this podcast. And, we're coming into the home stretch of what my initial goal was when we started this podcast, of doing 1 year. Even for the 6 months leading up to when we started this podcast, I was doing all these wacky ass videos on social media, just trying to generate interest and like, oh my God, what the, and get people, curious to start watching when we started it. And so now, here we are coming into the home stretch. The point I'm making is I committed to doing it for 1 year. And so we're like 9 episodes away from 1 full year, 52 weeks of this podcast. And I'm trying to decide, well, okay, once we accomplish that goal, then what? Do I just abandon 21,000 views on the YouTube channel and say, okay, well, we did a year, I'm done, walk away and leave it at that? I have a lot of fun doing this podcast. I'll also say it's a lot of fucking work, man. It truly has, as I've said on here many times, taken on a life of its own. Oh, God, I could go on and on about talking about that, and I will talk more about it as we go later. I'll also say it's taken over my life in a lot of ways. There's a lot of prep work that goes into this show for both Dean and I. When I think about, okay, what are we going to cover this week? What kind of guests are we going to have lined up? Putting the slides together, putting the videos together, all this stuff, this whole idea of going live and all that. So Dean and I are going to have some meetings about it. We had a meeting today talking about what's the future of this podcast, what's the direction we're going to go. One of the things I talk about on this podcast is enlightenment, y'all, and spirituality and things to that nature, and how it's so crucial and important in helping a guy like me in my recovery from addiction. And so, yeah, man, I put out there on social media, I'm always putting stuff out there, just quite frankly, trying to get attention, y'all, hey, me, look at me, like everybody else on social media, to promote the podcast and hopefully get attention. And so one of the things I put out there is that I've been praying real hard on, and it's true. I'm not just flowering this up, for the sake of social media. It's true, but I did post it on social media that I've been praying hard, like, okay, God, what the hell am I supposed to do with this thing now? You brought me this far with this podcast. Now what? And I've been meditating real deep on what direction to go with it. and listening for answers. In my life, man, it's so fucking crazy, so bizarre sometimes how things work out for me. And so what I posted today that I thought I'd show on this edition of the show is that I read a couple of daily inspirational books. I had a few, and I fell behind a couple of days because my buddy Mark's here visiting in town. So this morning I caught up on a couple of them. I read a book called The Daily Stoic, which a lot of people know it's real popular. And I couldn't help but show this passage, and I'm just going to zip through it real quick as it relates to kind of smacking me right in the face with what am I going to do with this podcast? And as it says, let all your efforts be directed to something. Let it keep that end in view. It's not activity that disturbs people, but false conceptions of things that drive them mad. And then here's what I found was really interesting and that applied to exactly where my mindset is on where I'm supposed to go with this podcast now. Law 29 of the 48 laws of power is plan all the way to the end. Robert Greene writes, by planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances and you will know when to stop. What the fuck? It's just fucking so bizarre to me how that applies to exactly what I've been praying about and meditating on as it relates to this podcast since the beginning of the year. Gently guide fortune and help determine the future by thinking far ahead. The second habit in the 7 habits of highly effective people is begin with an end in mind, which is exactly what we did with this podcast. Let me just go ahead. Having an end in mind is no guarantee that you'll reach it. No Stoic would tolerate that assumption, but not having an end in mind is a guarantee you won't. To the Stoics, false conceptions are responsible not just for disturbances in the soul, but for chaotic and dysfunctional lives and operations. When your efforts are not directed at a cause or a purpose, how will you know what to do day in and day out? And how will you know what to say no to and what to say yes to? How will you know when you've had enough? When you've reached your goal? When you've gotten off track? If you've never defined what those things are? The answer is that you cannot. And so you are driven into failure or worse, into madness by the oblivion of directionlessness. I know some of y'all must be thinking that motherfucker gone mad a long time ago and that whole thing. But, you know, the point I'm making is this really slapped me in the face in terms of what I was just talking about with this podcast. I did start it with an end in mind, and we're approaching that end as of March 10th. We will be live every Sunday from today up until March 10th, which will be 52 weeks in a row. We've never missed one Sunday with this podcast. And that will conclude exactly what we set out to do. Oh, and I ain't giving up now. You can damn sure bet on that. We did not get this close to throwing the towel now, especially after seeing the numbers I just shared. Let me share this passage as well. Now, this is from another book I read daily called The Golden Present, and it's all passages from this yogi, Swami Satchidananda. And anyway, it says, have fun and play your part. As long as you're in the world playing a part in this big drama, use the makeup and the costumes, but don't get caught in your part. Have fun and play that part until the curtain falls. What the hell, y'all? That's what I mean. My mind was such a trip because here I'm, trying to decide what to do with this fucking podcast. And then I read something like this, the curtain is about to fall, y'all. We're about to reach that 1-year milestone. And I don't want to get caught in this part. One of the things Dean and I talked about before the show today is we both have to a certain extent felt like we're being held hostage every Sunday night. We committed to doing this and we've stuck by that commitment and we're going to stick by it until March 10th. I completely lost my Sundays because It's all about prep for the podcast and doing this podcast every Sunday night and all the work leading up to it. And I'm not complaining, y'all. I'm not complaining. This has been the time of my life. It has been helpful to me in my recovery, accountability, and we have helped people. We know for a fact. Go back and watch some of the excerpts from that New Year's Eve edition that we did. Man, we touched them in the first hour. I'm going to pull some clips from that and show it again on some of the shows coming up before we reach that year milestone. But this smacked me in the face. And then, as it says, many people finish their part even in the midst of the drama. Once their part is over, they make their exit. Is my part over? Is it time for me to make my exit? Then they don't come back to the stage again. They are supposed to exit stage left and never come back. On the world stage, many of us finish our job and leave, but the drama continues. Maybe the hero, the heroine, or the villain will continue throughout and be the last people to leave the stage. In the meantime, many extras come and go. We are probably all extras. Remembering this will help to keep the ego a little bit soft. So, anyhow, there's a lot of different things going on in that passage and all, y'all, but I'm sure you get the point that I'm making. It's those two passages, man. Here I fell a couple days behind, and I'm praying and meditating on what to do with this podcast. And I read those things, and it helped me. It truly did help me to decide, okay, when we reach that episode 52, some decisions need to be made. And so one of the things I can say here tonight, and Dean, I know you don't mind me saying this either. I don't mean to speak for you, but Dean and I did agree we are going to continue this podcast, y'all, but in a much different way. We're not going to continue to do it live every single Sunday night. Like most podcasts, we're going to start recording this thing at a time convenient for both of us that may be different at different times throughout the week. We'll come to some kind of a decision on when we're going to post it, if we're going to do a YouTube video premiere on a certain night of the week or whatever else, or, and we very well may still go live from time to time. We enjoy doing the live thing. But the point I'm making, y'all, is we're going to stick to this commitment. We're going to keep doing it the way we have been right up until week number 52, March 10th. But there's some changes coming to this podcast, y'all. And we're also going to take a break for a minute, man. We continue to run some pre-recorded versions just to keep the thing going, and not just completely disappear. But change is coming. We're going to tighten it up a little bit, do some tweaking and all that other stuff. Start, really putting it out there, maybe even like in a season for a dozen episodes, and get it out there on platforms like Spotify and SoundCloud and Apple and all the different things. And, wherever you get your favorite, platform for podcasts and all that stuff, and just work on taking it to the next level, like that boy Anonymous who we had on the show, a couple of weeks ago, talks a lot about leveling up, taking the Dare Me podcast from the 1.0 version to the 2.0 version, and so on and so forth. So anyway, y'all, I didn't mean to go on and on too long about it, but we did want to talk about the future of the Dare Me podcast, and I couldn't resist sharing those two passages that I literally read this morning after falling behind on my daily readings for a couple of days. And here I've been praying and meditating on, what am I supposed to do with this podcast now that we brought it this far? And so those are the answers I got. So anyhow, let's move along, y'all. Dean, I'm going to go ahead and bypass that next slide because we're running a little longer than I thought at this point, and we're just going to wrap it up with one quick funny meme, y'all, and then we're going to wrap the show up because we're trying to make this NA meeting that starts at 7:30 tonight, about 10 minutes from my house, so we could go present that boy Mark with his 3-year clean time medallion. And I thought this was relevant based on everything I just told y'all about the podcast, because nobody tells me what to do. And the way we've been doing this podcast has definitely been quite different than anything I've ever seen out there on the internet. There's a lot of different podcasts out there and some damn good ones, having to do with recovery and topics relevant to what we talk about, that I follow, and grateful for them. Ours is quite a bit different. And, I just thought this was a good, funny meme to show because nobody tells me what to do. So, with all that said, y'all, I'm going back in our slides because I want to show this one more time. Big shout out to my old pal and friend Mark, who is here visiting Sacramento from Orlando, Florida. And this is a picture of the two of us from just day before yesterday. He wanted to go see some snow. And of course, my girl Jazzy, who I'm holding there, she's been a star of the Dear Me podcast several times. We took a trip up to Lake Tahoe because Mark wanted to see some snow. And there's another picture of us. You can see the lake in the background and some snow. And Mark is literally in the room right next door, probably watching the podcast live on the big screen TV. He was just still getting ready when we started the show tonight. And as soon as I sign off here, we are literally going to walk out the front door of the studio, hop in my car, drive about 10 minutes down the road to the NA meeting that I will have the pleasure and the honor to present him with his not one, not two, but 3-year medallion for 3 continuous years of clean time. Mark is celebrating 3 years clean tonight, y'all. So, oh my God, I'm so proud to call him my friend, y'all. Y'all have no idea. And it just goes to show, and I'll share this and then we'll wrap it up, that you will meet people in the program. When I say the program, I mean the 12-step programs, AA, NA, you pick it, man, that you will form a bond with. I have met the best people I've ever met in my life, because at the end of the day, it's all about helping save each other's lives. We have our ups and downs, and people relapse and come back, and there's disagreements and there's drama, just like there is in any other circle, whether it's work or church groups or bars or social clubs or whatever else. We all go through our shit. One thing about the 12-step rooms and the program, like I just said, is when you boil it down to the least common denominator, it's about helping each other save each other's life. And I am truly blessed and honored. Oh, man, I'm trying not to get emotional, to have a friend like Mark, and a friend who flew all the way here to Sacramento, California from Orlando, Florida, just to ask me to present him with his 3-year medallion on his 3-year anniversary of being drug-free. And so with all that said, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up so we can get out the door so I can do just exactly that. If you're going through hell, you're struggling with addiction, you come across our podcast, whether it's the live version, I see we got people watching right now, or someone maybe sees this recorded version, sees the recorded version of this show down the road. You're going through hell, keep fucking going. You can come out the other side, man. You can do this. If I can do it, if Mark can do it, if Steve can do it, if Marvin can do it, if all the rest, that have participated in this podcast can do it, you can too. So with all that said, Dean, thank you so much for letting me go 90 miles an hour on the podcast. But, we did it, man. We got through in 1 hour and 15 minutes. How about that? That's
how about that
for us, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, Dean, hey, I'll just say this real quick and then we will wrap it up. Thank you, as always, for your participation, everything you do to keep us going. And thank you as well for your support of the future of this podcast and everything we talked about, before the show today. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you and taking this podcast to the next level. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No. It's been a whirlwind evening. Very fast. Okay. Here
Well,
we go.
hey, there's our first full episode of the brand new year 2024 in the can. With all that said, thanks again, Dean. Thanks again to everybody who's been watching and listening. We appreciate your support of the Dare Me podcast, and we will see you next time on the Dare Me podcast. So long, y'all.